And, this brings up another question I had. You segued perfectly. Peter brings up the question, he's talking to Master Nowak, am I saying that right?
Yes, Novak, yeah.
Novak, of course, I should know that. I spent my first 5 years in Germany. I almost minored in German in college. I should have known that was so he's talking to his amber master, Master Novak, and he's complaining about how his father suddenly seems so old and bent down, and Master Novak says, don't judge him, and yet Peter is thinking, but you also have lived through these 27 years of war, and you're not like my father. You still, get up in the morning, you get dressed nicely, you're cheerful, you're patient, you're all these wonderful things. And he kind of asks, at least for himself, why the difference? But you don't really answer that. So to your mind, why do some people handle extended difficulty much better and some handle it much, much worse?
I think partly it comes down to character and individual personalities, and partly it comes down to how fragile you already were when disaster strikes. And some people have more resilience, and some people also have a fair dollop of what I might call some sort of inner discipline. My parents were very strong on that because my parents lived through some, and they all, you just have to make do. You have to somehow get through it. I am not sure I have an answer for why some people are weary and less able to keep their heads up. His father, though, eventually does manage and does bounce out of it. And I guess I also wanted to show to some extent the teenager who is judgmental and is less understanding. And towards the end, he becomes more understanding also of his father.
Right. Yeah. One of the things I liked about your book was there is such clear growth in him, and it doesn't happen overnight by any means, so it's very realistic in that sense that you see him bit by bit growing up, bit by bit starting to understand why people might be the way they are, and yes, being a little less judgmental. So talk just a little bit about the history. Like it opens up with the 15-year-old boy afraid. Well, he's not really afraid to go on the beach, but he's thinking he should be afraid because people have been hanged for less. What is some of the history behind that?
The history is that amber was an extremely controlled substance, and from basically the 14th century on, either the German Order of Knights and later various merchants and ultimately the King of Prussia had absolute monopoly and control over amber. And that included form of amber prospecting. So anyone that without permission was on the beach collecting amber was subject to extreme penalties. And these penalties got more extreme as there was less amber to go around. And amber was very valuable, thus for the King of Prussia, the Duke of Brandenburg, the Order of German Knights. To control it was an extremely economical, it was a question of economics and politics because amber was used in trade. So for someone like Peter to go on the beach was breaking all the rules. He really was not permitted without a permit.
Right, and that comes up at the end of the book as he has to choose, what he's going to do about the fact that somebody's going to pay a price for what he did. There's a really interesting story you bring up, and again, this is one of the things I love, all these historical bits and pieces, and at the end you tell where all of this is coming from, including the songs they sing, absolutely everything. You bring up this story of Reeve Anselmus. Did I say that even
Oh,
remotely?
yeah. No, see, we grew up on him. I used to have nightmares about the reeve. The reeve,
I can imagine.
no, truly, the reeve was a early 14th century guy who had been put in place by the Order of German Knights. He had been in charge of amber and the amber collection and amber production. And he became incredibly harsh in his penalties. And when he died, he was sorry. And after his death, his disembodied soul would run up and down the beach, or he would ride up and down the beach, yelling, amber free, amber free. In other words, he took back all his, he felt so bad. He basically decided that amber was free to everybody. And of course, he couldn't because he was dead. And
He's dead.
By that point, the rules had become even more strenuous. But this was a legend that we read, and people in those times read. They all knew about the reeve. And there are some other legends, German legends, of people riding along the beach during storms while the dikes are breaking and in very bad weather. And these legends, sort of in my mind, blended with the reeve running up and down the beach in his past death stage as a ghost yelling amber free. So yeah, I was always haunted by that.
So I'm curious, where do you think this story grew up? Do you think that somebody actually did experience seeing him, or did they?
Oh no, I'm sure that he was a real person.
Right,
He was a historical figure. And
yeah.
I don't know how that particular legend developed, but I am sure he bitterly regretted what he did at the end.
One would
out of that legend.
Right. So I want to talk a little bit about writing craft. One of the things I thought you did really well with this was weaving in the backstory, because you can't, as authors, we can't tell the whole backstory and then start. You have to pick sort of a tense moment or something that will capture. You did a really good job of starting. He's on the beach. He could have something awful happen to him. And then over the next, 10, 12 chapters, bit by bit, we get more and more of the background of his sister is a little bit off, and today we'd probably say she was autistic or something.
Yeah.
What is your best advice to other authors, how to weave in backstory, how to dole it out bit by bit, not give too much too soon, how to know where to start the story to capture the reader's interest?
I hesitate because I struggle with precisely this issue, and I am shy about telling others how to do it. My best advice would be to get as much information as you can and lay it out, and then start cutting back.
Okay.
Basically, whatever information you have is probably too much for the story, but you need to synthesize, and you need to start out with way too much and then start reducing it.
Okay.
And I guess the other is to jump in and make it as vivid as possible, include it in dialogue.
Yeah,
include it as it is. I think there's too much. I have struggled with this in other books as well. It is a continuing challenge.
I thought you did a great job with it.
Thank you.
Speaking of your other books, tell us a little bit about the memoir that you I guess you edited it.
It's actually, that's a very interesting. Thank you for asking about that. It's not literally, it is a memoir, but it's the most unusual memoir you can imagine. My father had been arrested by the failed July 20th assassination attempt on Hitler. And he had been one of the people involved, not in the planning specifically of that attack, but in the preparation for what would happen if the attack was successful. So he had been one of the key people in the resistance, and he was arrested within about 5 days after July 20th. And he hadn't bothered to hide because he figured there was no point in running away. He was then 63, and he had just celebrated his birthday. And the Gestapo came into his office, and when they arrested him, they took all the paper that they found in his office and took all that paper and cell. And he had, roughly speaking, from his arrest to the trial and execution. And in those days, he took the papers that he had with him and wrote on the backs of them. And he also, my father, was in that time period able to get him a little bit more paper to write on, because my father knew he was writing, or he assumed he was writing. And somehow he was allowed to transmit some paper and some cigarettes. So my grandfather wrote in those 30 days, more than 500 pages. It turned out to be more than 500 typed pages of memoirs.
In 30 days.
In 30 days. And he must have written basically nonstop.
Yeah.
And he was able to write, he described his life from his early youth. He got up 29. And my father, and he had outlined the periods afterwards. But at 1929, once he reached that point, the trial started, and that was the end. Mm-hmm. And my father always said it was fortunate that he was not able to write about the period after, because at that point he would have started to have to disguise the names, to talk in code, to write less honestly. The period until 1929, he could write fairly frankly about all his experiences and all his friends without endangering anybody. And he knew that there were friends of his also arrested, prisons next to him in the prison cells. He was very conscious of this. Right. So my father said it is ironic, but just as well that he was not able to move further, because then it would have started to become fake and not as frank.
Right. Yeah. Very.
And when we published this, we did zero editing. We provided footnotes and explanations. Okay. And we created an index, but his writing was essentially flawless, which is absolutely incredible.
Right.
We just had to type it out from his handwritten notes.
That reminds me of, I'm thinking of St. Teresa of Avila, a similar thing, where she was told to write some of her life story. And I forget, it was maybe a couple months, because there was like a 5-month break, but the actual time was only a month or two.
Right.
She created Interior Mansions, which even today people are still reading. And it was a similar thing where she just sat down and wrote, and pretty much as is.
And let me tell you one more thing that's really, I always am moved by that. He did not refer to where he was, except in the very beginning, with a sentence basically saying a prison cell is a good place to write one's memoirs. And then he moved on. And at one point, he wrote a verse from a hymn on the edge of the paper, essentially saying, and you take us through death's doors and make us suddenly free, which is it's a beautiful dreaming, you take us by the hand through death's doors and make us suddenly free, which is an amazing, and no comment, he just put that on the side as if he had been thinking about that. Other than that, he does not refer to prison, and he does not refer to his circumstances, and some of it is very funny. It's hilarious. He enjoyed good food and good wine and good theater, and he loved women and he loved parties, and he had a great sense of humor. And all of that comes through in the writing. So it's an amazing document because it's it's just so bizarre as a statement of human resilience under the worst of circumstances.
Right, which is exactly what you're talking about a lot in your book. And part of why that's so great is this book is very suitable for even a middle school easily. You know, it's an easy read, but it's very profound. And I kind of feel like I'm, you know, just saying the same thing to everyone because I said that's last week, but it's true in both cases. You know,
thank you.
They don't feel like heavy reads, but they are full of very profound ideas. And I would, you know, hopefully I've got like thousands of people listening to this and they'll all run out and buy it for their kids or grandchildren. Because it's a really important aspect of life that I don't think kids today understand because their lives are so easy. And, you know, one little thing goes wrong and they can't handle it because they've
Although kids today have had a fairly rough time in the last
year and a half or so, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
But most kids in America have never had to live through war. And so, in fact, next week's guest, Ilona, will also be probably talking about living through the fall of the Soviet Union and the wars that happened in Georgia and Armenia. And so she did experience that as a child.
Yeah.
So she'll have a lot to say. So what
I look forward to that. I'm sorry?
What is your upcoming, what are you working on now?
I am actually, I'm at the tail end of a very difficult project. I wrote a biography of my mother.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
I tried to also write a little bit about what it was like for the next generation to live with all these stories from the past, and yet also to live at the same time with people who were not able to talk about many things. It was a mix of many stories and a lot of silence at the same time. A sort of perverse. And as children, I knew that there were certain boundaries. We did not ask questions. We listened to stories that my mother told us, but there were invisible barriers. At some point, we had internalized these barriers. I don't know how, and I regret it because I wish I had asked more, but we were not comfortable asking.
Right.
So I tried to tease all of this out and describe her experiences. And this is straightforward biology.
Right. Well, I bet that will be interesting, especially considering the times she grew up in.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to look at history, or we don't understand a lot of what's happening today if we don't understand history.
Yeah.
It's both, you know, personal, political, in the world, all big. You know, it's really important to understand what led to things we're dealing with now. So, do you have any favorite lines in this book?
In the Amber Crane?
Yeah.
Oh no, that's a difficult. I wish I had thought about that.
I'll tell you three of my favorite lines.
Oh yeah, please.
Yeah, I set aside three specifically, and one I think it comes toward the end, and I think it's Peter who maybe says to, am I pronouncing it right, Leo?
Yeah, Lioba.
Okay, Lioba. He says to her, sometimes you have to be willing to leave things behind. And I thought that's one of those profound comments. And I was thinking there's been a lot of change in my life in the past year and a half, especially. And that's, you know, some of it's obviously been bad, like I lost my job. Some of it's been good, like I got married. I moved into a beautiful new house. But I remember a moment where we were getting stuff cleared out of my old house, and I had this big couch that I absolutely loved. I loved the colors, I loved the shape. It was teal, but it was really getting ratty. And my daughter's like, and the dog's been on it, and it stinks. And we have this free trash pickup day, like once every 3 years, where you can shove anything you want out on the curb, and the city will take it for free. And I really fought with myself, like, I love this couch. It matches the artwork I have above it. I didn't want to give it up, but I knew I had to. Like, the room is too cluttered, the thing's getting ratty, I don't want to have to haul it with me. And I thought I would really miss it, and I never did. You know, and I've had several such experiences like that. Like, even leaving the house I just left. This is actually the third house I've lived in a year, in addition to an apartment. Like I said, there's been a lot of change in my life. But the house I just moved out of was my husband's house before I married him, and it was a beautiful house. And I thought, I'm going to miss this so much. I sit in the sunroom surrounded by plants every morning, and I read here. I don't want to leave. I've come to love this house. But I left it, and I found out, you know, I've got an entire sun house. Like, I showed you a little bit of the walls. It's just all walls.
Laura, you move me to tears because no, truly, you move me to tears because that is precisely one of the main points I am trying to make in this biography of my mother, where I'm trying to tell my nephews who are struggling with too much family stuff. I am trying to tell them, look, you need to let it go. Those don't define you. And all the stuff that my mother loved and thought was important, it's not important to you. And there comes a point where you can make your peace and say, let it go. And there's another life, and you create your own loves and obsessions. And you don't have to take on all the ghosts and all the things and keep passing them on. You don't. So what you just are going through, that's, I think everybody is at some level, and everybody has to make peace with letting go. And it is so hard and so important.
The second line I really loved was, well, that was the result of hysteria, which can be very dangerous. I think we're looking at a lot of very deep fears today. So that line jumped out at me.
All do,
Yeah. And then the third line I really liked, and this again goes, you know, it probably jumped out to me because of my life. And it was, I want to craft pieces of amber that will make people happy. They will not stop the war or bring back my dead brother, but they will be beautiful. And that really jumped out at me because I grew up, my father is a military officer, and I grew up like, I think the very first words he ever said to me, he came back from Vietnam when I was 6 months old. And I'm positive his first words ever to me were, you're going to college and you're paying for it yourself. And it was with the understanding I would do something important, like, you know, become a doctor or a lawyer or a scientist. And instead, you know, he ended up with this daughter who didn't want to do anything but play music. And so I play, you know, roughly a dozen instruments at this point, not so well anymore, which is a long story. You know, but that was, it ended up being for me a real struggle that I was being told what matters to me, what I was born to do isn't important, and it doesn't matter. And at a certain point, you know, I really came to understand that putting beauty into the world does matter. It matters a great deal because people are dealing with very, very hard things. And what are they going to do if there's nothing beautiful? You know, if you're dealing with hard things, you can read books, you can listen to music, you can watch ballet, you can look at art, and it lifts your soul and takes you to a place that is equally important. You know, it can draw you to God, it can inspire you and really take you to a better place, and we do need that. So that line really jumped out at me.
I love that you picked that out, because that's also another element that I think is so important. The expectations others lay on us, like a heavy burden. Again, ultimately, what they want from us is that we are ourselves, and that we do.
And
they
it's
frame
really
it as
say that because that's
law school, or you must go, you must become a doctor, or you must go to college. But ultimately, that's not even what they want. They want us to fight for whatever it is that's important to us.
And that's exactly what
I think for many young people, they struggle with that and think that I am not doing what my parents want, but that's okay.
Right.
Way. And ultimately, that's what they want.
Do you have any close?
So yeah, thank you. Do I have?
Any closing,
I'm sorry.
do you have any closing words this week?
No, I am so moved by your comments and so grateful for your interest. And you asked such great questions.
Oh, thank you.
I had not even thought about some of this perfectly well. I sort of am a fly by the seat of my pants writer, and a lot of it is luck. I get lucky with a story, and I get lucky with how it sort of seems to work out, but I'm sloppy. So you force me to think it through, and I love your questions.
Well,
I love your thoughtfulness. So
I think you did a great job. If you think you were sloppy, I think you did fine. What are your links where people can find you? Like, what is your website?
My website is my name, all in one, at .com, malvevonhassell.com.
Okay.
www.malvevonhassell.com.
Okay, and is it VON?
VON, correct.
And HASS?
SSELL.
Two L's. Two S's.
Yeah, 2 L's.
Okay, so you can find me at lauravosica.com or bluebellschronicles.com. I'm also at booksandbrews.net. And Gabriel is accepting poetry submissions at
Tell me the title of your book.
Oh, the title of my book is, there are 5, and the whole series is called The Bluebell's Chronicles. And so it's all Irish and Scottish folk songs. So it's Bluebells of Scotland, The Minstrel Boy, The Water is Wide. I can't believe I can't remember.
That's beautiful. Okay.
And then the last one is The Battle of Zor. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let me introduce next month's guest is Ilona Perunikova. Ilona was born to a Ukrainian mother and an Armenian father in the Republic of Georgia. Her relatives lived to tell the horrific tales of war from the Ottoman genocide of the Armenian people during World War I, and she herself survived wartime in the Republic of Georgia after the collapse of the USSR. Ilona endured ethnic discrimination. She experienced rejection from her grandparents, was mocked by her relatives, and denied admission to universities because of her ethnicity. At that time, she felt rejected and an outcast as a result of the massive political discrepancies between Russia and Georgia. Throughout that discouraging season in her life, Ilona fought to stay strong and found the inspiration to pursue further studies and accomplish exceptional feats. And so I'll talk more about that next week, and hopefully people will want to chime in. And Ilona actually talks about a lot of what you were just saying about how we have to find ourselves and who we were really meant to be and what we were called to do. So thank you so much for being on my program.
Thank you, Laura.
This has been episode number 6 of Step Into a Story with Malve von Hassell.
Thank you.